Thank you so much for joining us today.
This is a story about suffering, remembrance, and gratefulness. This is not just the story of our people. It's a story about an alliance forged between us and our allies, based on our shared values. This is a story about our civilization. 21 years ago, this nation was in its darkest hour. A brutal, barbarous regime had unleashed with all its fury and military might a massive campaign of ethnic cleansing against a civilian population. The Milosevic regime was committing unspeakable crimes with impunity. There were tortures, sexual violence during the war, and massacres. This, ladies and gentlemen, was not a war between two states. Rather, this was a confrontation between two worlds. Our values of freedom and tolerance were pitted against barbarism. Our civilization was at stake. Today, as we celebrate our Liberation Day, or as we call it, the Day of Peace, we remember those who gave everything so that we would be free today. We remember the victims, more than 13,000 innocent civilians killed simply because they happened to speak a different language. We remember the 1,133 children killed, victims of a criminal regime that spared no one. We remember the 1,641 civilians who remain disappeared to this day. We pray for their souls wherever they dwell. We remember those thousands survivors of sexual violence during the war, whom to this day can't find peace because we have failed to bring the aggressors to justice and hold Serbia accountable for its horrific past. We remember those who had to suffer inhumane and degrading tortures in prisons. Their only crime was to have been born and raised differently. We remember our men and women who worked selflessly to lighten our path so that we would be free and independent one day. We remember our heroes who risked their lives to protect ours, and our martyrs who died so that we would be free. But today, we also remember you, our allies who came to our rescue in our time of need. We remember those courageous NATO soldiers who risked their lives, and those who gave the ultimate sacrifice to save some people they did not know. We remember those who sacrificed in the name of our values of freedom and peace. Back in the 90s, we had seen the imperfection of men. We had experienced the limits of reason. Ours was a world when each passing day was worse than the preceding one, and there was no end in sight. I remember vividly the scenes of people kneeling, crying, and kissing the land before forcibly leaving the country because they knew that they might never return. We were abandoning our hope, losing our faith. Only when we see things in light of this suffering and hopeless situation can we begin to fathom what it meant at that time to be rescued by you.
Thank you all for being here today. It was a very challenging expedition. Most of the troops moved from Skopje and Kumanovo, others through Kukes, some via Bosnia-Herzegovina. Tens of thousands uniformed personnel took their position on time, as scheduled by the high commands in Naples and Brussels under the superb leadership of Lieutenant General Sir Michael Rose, assisted by 5 brave sector commanding generals: John Craddock from the United States, Bruno Couche from France, Mauro Del Vecchio from Italy, Bill Rollo from the United Kingdom, Fritz von Korff from Germany. But I cannot avoid mentioning the chief architects of the entire operation, the NATO Supreme Allied Commanders Europe, General Wesley Clark, and Secretary General Dr. Javier Solana. It was an exemplary deployment, something that became a case study for unit commanders, strategists, and historians. As I said, it was an extremely demanding undertaking. Yugoslav troops were in retreat, but still present. It took a week to complete the pullout of the Yugoslavian National Army. Thanks to the professional behavior of KFOR soldiers the difficulties were overcome. The presence of many unexploded ordnance rendered the terrain very dangerous. Our EOD teams worked around the clock to clear paths and buildings. KFOR troops traveled non-stop up to 3 days in order to reach their respective area of responsibility. And in most of the cases, when they got to their destination, they did not find a place to stay, only destruction and an exhausted population.